if you're just trying to be comfortable all the time and you're not stretching yourself, you will not necessarily make a big ripple in your world. And by the way, the comfort is elusive and it comes at a cost too.
Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to the Best You podcast. My name is Nick Carrier, body optimization coach and creator of the 10-Week Transformation. The mission of the show is to help you get closer to the best version of yourself in all areas so that you can live a more meaningful and impactful life. In today's episode, I get the opportunity to sit down with a former longtime Vanderbilt University professor, best-selling author, and leadership consultant, Patrick Leddin. Patrick's a former U.S. Army captain who just released a book as a co-author with James Patterson. Yes, you heard that right. James Patterson, the best-selling author of all time. The book is called Disrupt Everything and Win. Take control of your future. This conversation is a super practical guide for anyone who's feeling stuck in the status quo and unsure if it's time to take a leap of faith. Patrick shares about how to assess disruption in your life, whether it's your career, your relationships, or your goals, and he gives frameworks to help you navigate major decisions with confidence. I loved our conversation. I asked him, there's a common phrase out there, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, we need to disrupt ourselves. We need to innovate. We need to become new versions of ourselves. Like, how do we balance those two differing opinions or those two differing thought patterns? And so we talked a lot about that. So you're going to hear incredible advice, but you're also going to hear an incredible story of how he came about to co-write this book with the best-selling author of all time, James Patterson. So buckle up for this one. It's going to be fun. For now, it's time to get closer to your best you. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I am super excited and super honored to be joined by the one and only Patrick Leddin. Patrick, I'm super excited to be on with you. I'm super excited. We've had a few people mutually kind of connected us a little bit over the years, but I haven't really ever had the time to sit down and chat it up with you about a number of different things. And perfect timing with the release of your book, Disrupt Everything. And you are an author with James Patterson, which is so cool. Like I just literally said right before we started recording, my mom's a huge reader of James Patterson, and I was telling her that I was interviewing a guy who wrote a book with James Patterson, and she was like, "Are you sure? I think you've probably got that wrong." But so actually, I kind of want to start right there.
Yeah.
I want to start with the story. I know you were teaching your class at Vanderbilt, and you had James Patterson come to teach to your students, or talk to your students, I should say. How did it come about where he's talking to your class, and then all of a sudden you're co-authoring a book with him?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me on the show. I've known you for a while.
Yeah.
It's good to get a chance to sit down and just chat.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird story in that it almost comes out of disruption itself. Right. So when COVID hit, I was a professor at Vanderbilt University for the last 11 years or so, and I ran undergraduate business for the university. So I've kind of ingrained in the institution. And when COVID hit, one of the things that they asked for was they wanted to know if there are any professors who were willing to teach a class of 100 students or more online.
Wow.
And in general, we don't teach classes at Vanderbilt of 100 students or more,
Yeah.
except a couple like science classes with the large lecture halls, things like that. And we don't teach anything online at undergraduate-wise. So it was kind of like this opportunity as I saw it. So I wanted to teach a class I was calling it Leading Business Through Times of Crisis.
Mm.
And I just felt like I'd had a few chances in my life to lead some things through some difficult, challenging times. I thought I could learn a lot by studying it more and teaching around it more. So I was really interested in it, and I got it approved. So out of that crisis of COVID came this course.
Totally.
And then I started teaching the class. COVID kind of did its thing, and we ended up back in the classroom. And about a semester into being back in the classroom, I got a message from someone, I don't even remember where it came from at this moment, but asking me if I'd be willing to do a special section of that course with a person who's on the board of trust at Vanderbilt named Michael Ainsley. And Michael Ainsley had talked in a class at Brown University about leading through challenging times. And his background is he was the CEO of Sotheby's, the auction house. He was on Lehman Brothers board when it collapsed. So he dealt with a lot of kind of challenging times. Yeah. And he had experienced this thing at Brown. He said, boy, could we teach this class at Vanderbilt, his alma mater, and we was on the board of trust. And it was kind of like that Plinko game on Price is Right, where they drop the thing and it goes, doot, 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 doot. I think that's what happened. It kind of just fell through and all of a sudden it landed in my lap. They're like, he wants to teach a class on this. You're teaching a class on this. Why don't you work with him? So we had a special section every semester where we would bring in guest speakers. And it was kind of a cool setup, Nick, because you had like 30 students in a room. And you had people come in, like I remember the CEO of American Airlines came in, Doug Parker, along with the president of the Flight Attendants Association. So the labor and management in the room together, talking to students about how they went through COVID or how they worked with a difficult time. And it was all these different really interesting people. Well, one of the people on the list was James Patterson. And James Patterson has his master's from Vanderbilt, which I didn't know at the time, but I learned thereafter. So I had to go through the list of call everybody, right, who was coming to the class. And I would say, basically, how can I help you have this be the best experience? So some people we'd write a case study for. Some people wanted me to interview them. Other people were just like, sit down, Patrick, I don't need you. I can talk for an hour and 15 minutes to students. It was that type of thing. And I was just talking with him, then kind of setting that up. And then he came and did the class. And when he talked to the class that day, it was kind of funny, Nick. He looks at the students, he says, "Hi, I'm Stephen King," which is a great opening line, right? And then he goes, he says to them something to the fact of, "Are you living a good life?" And he went on to then tell them about how he worked at having his own good life and telling them he wanted them to live a good life too. And by the time the thing was over and I was listening to who he was talking that day, I was like, gosh, this guy's a real disruptor. He used to be the CEO of J. Walter Thompson, the ad agency, back in his 30s. And he decided to quit it to work, to write full time. I mean, can you imagine that? It's 1994, 1995. You're making millions of dollars a year in your 30s as a creative director, then the CEO of the company. You go, you know what? I want to write books. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's a big pivot. That's ridiculous. A move, right? But you want to figure out how to be the best himself, type of thing. So then he did that, and then he changed writing by working with multiple authors and putting out multiple books a year and genres, and really kind of went from being an author to just a force. And so I approached him and I said, let's write a book together. It was kind of funny because I wrote like the worst sales pitch you could ever imagine. I wrote him an email and said, I like you, you like me, let's write a book together. Yeah. And he didn't answer me, go figure. Yeah. And then I came back a little bit later on with a stronger argument saying, here's why I think this would make sense and here's what I could do and blah, 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 blah. And sure enough, I got some time with him. Wow. And then I wrote a couple outlines that he didn't like, and then I got one that worked. And then I was able to get Vanderbilt to sponsor a research project. So I ran a research project for a few years where we I sat down and long form interviewed about 350 people, a little over 350, and then surveyed thousands more. Had a really great team of students working out with me. And then we just kind of kept working on it for the last few years. So yeah, this is the actual first copy of the book. It just came in the mail today. It comes out a month from now. So.
It works perfectly with the colors.
Yeah, I know. I love it. That's what I told him. I said, it needs to be yellow and black.
That's awesome. That's so cool that this all came out of COVID, disruption that was implanted into everybody's lives, created a course, and then all of it, like you said, trickled down from that. I'm interested, something like disruption and something like unexpected situations and circumstances that are really tough are the definition of like not linear. Mm-hmm. And so how do you think about when you're first planning out to build a course on navigating crisis? How do you think about building out a course on something that is very not linear because every negative circumstance is a little bit different and you kind of have to react as you go and it's, like I said, not linear. So how do you think about building out a course on disruption? Yeah, so I think that it comes down to a few things because you're right. It can't play out perfectly, right. And you can't necessarily anticipate it. When I was in the Army, I used to jump out of planes for a living, and one time I remember it was my first like nighttime jump in the 82nd Airborne Division, and by nighttime they meant like 2:00 in the morning. I think that night there were 1,500 people jumping out of 20-some planes. I mean, it was like a big deal, 22 airplanes, and in 2 minutes, everybody's in the air, right? And they can anticipate some things that are going to happen there, some different disruptions that might happen, like what if your parachute doesn't open, or what if you crash in the trees, or what if you... And actually, that particular night, I crashed into the tree, so it makes me think about it, but they had like specific steps you could follow, right? But what if you don't have steps you can follow? What if it isn't linear? What if something comes out of the blue, or somebody listening to this right now is like listening as they drive to the doctor and then get message that they don't want to get, type of thing, right? So the question becomes, how do you deal with that? I can't have a script to follow, so I need to be really clear on where I want to go, who I am, what my purpose is in life. We call it your fire inside in the book, but what's your fire inside? And then how could each disruption afford you an opportunity to actually throw fuel on that fire? Yeah. Let's go back to the prior to a disruption happening, prior to a negative situation upcoming. Like you said, you used to be in the U.S. Army, the 82nd Airborne Division, and you guys, the Army is probably known to be as proactive as anything else, to be as anticipatory as anything else, and think about the worst case scenarios and plan for it. Talk to us a little bit about how people who are living out their everyday lives, maybe they're not in the Army jumping out
Yeah,
of
sure.
planes, but how they should be thinking about, because there's kind of a fine line if you don't want to be like a doomsday person all the time. The worst is always going to happen. I'm always preparing for the worst, always preparing for the worst. But like, there's a time and place for that 100%. So for people who are listening to this, what are like different things, maybe when it comes to their like personalized family lives, their careers, that they can be doing proactively in anticipation, so that when a negative situation does come, they're not as negatively impacted as they might otherwise be?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that you're right. You can't think through every scenario. I actually read this article one time years ago. I was getting ready to fly on an airplane, and I sat down and I grabbed, this is when we would grab a lot of magazines. So I grabbed an outside magazine from the store, and I had it with me, and I pulled this thing open, and I kid you not, it says to me, one of the first articles I see says, how to survive a plane crash.
Okay.
And I'm like, I just sat down on a plane. Maybe this is like an omen or something. And it went through and it said make sure your seatbelt is tight, and make sure that, they talk about a flotation device. Actually check and see if it's there.
Yeah.
And keep your shoes on during takeoff and landing. And then it says, put on a flame retardant hood. Is literally what it said. I thought the other ones make sense, but the flame retardant hood, I'm probably not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I think the takeaway from that is you're not going to do every step. You're not going to think through every possible thing. There's a cost that comes from preparing for anything. And whether it's your time or your energy, I mean, do you want to invest all your time preparing for the worst of things? Probably not. But what you can do is you can think about, where do I want to go? What really matters a lot to me? What do I value? What am I passionate about? What am I talented at? What's my inner voice telling me needs to be done in the world? You can think through those type of things, because understanding what true north is for you is really a critical thing when you hit the tough times. Mm-hmm. Then beyond that, beyond kind of doing that good inside homework, beyond that, you can get really good at thinking about, okay, when a situation comes, before I just react to it, maybe I should discern what to do. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should understand my strengths. So these are things we kind of talk about in the book and in our research about how the best folks, they expect the best, plan for the worst sometimes. Right. And actually that Doug Parker guy from American Airlines, one of the lines he said that stuck with me when he talked to students, he said, a crisis is never the time to start making introductions. Mm. They said, you want to know who you need to know, the people in your industry, the people in your world. I mean, you want to have friends and all sorts of people long before the problem comes along. Totally. And I think that's so true.
Totally. I was literally at church this past Sunday, and the talk was just about community and the importance of relationships or whatnot. And pastor was just talking about how don't wait to form really good relationships when you really need them. Because if you don't have strong relationships and a crisis happens, you don't have anybody to lean back on, then it's going to be a whole lot harder than it would otherwise be. This kind of brings me to a story in the book about you and your mother, about you being in a meeting, and the speaker at the meeting was asking everybody, like, what are the roles that you play? What are the relationship roles that you play in life? And how are those going? How are the highest priority roles that you're playing going? And you kind of realize that maybe my relationship with my mom isn't as good as I want it to be right now. Take us through that story moving from there and kind of the lesson along the lines of what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking about that. So in the book, most of the stories are other people, right? People that we studied. And it literally is like unsung heroes to household names. There's a whole range of people in the book. But there are two different parts where Patterson kind of speaks in his voice and I tell one of my stories. So his is more in the introduction, and then mine is buried into the book a little bit further on, where we're talking about disrupting relationships. And this is exactly the story you're talking about. So what happened was, for those who are listening, what happened was my mom had some health problems along the way. But a few years before she had some health problems, I was sitting in a workshop, and the facilitator of the workshop asked us to draw like a bullseye, like a couple of concentric circles. And they said, imagine that represents a pie with these different kind of circles in it, kind of like a target. And they asked us to think through all the different roles we fill in life. Yeah. And they were like, any given time, anybody listening to this as well as yourself and myself, we might have 20 or 30 roles. You're like a friend, you might be a spouse, you might be a parent, you might be a project leader, a podcast host, fitness guru, whatever you are, right? You have lots of different roles. And she said, okay, list all the roles and then pick 5 or 6 of them that you feel like are the real critical ones right now. The first few were easy to pick off because there were things like I'm a parent, I'm a spouse, I'm running this project right now. I could fill those in. And then I started looking through the list and going, you know what? Son's an important role. I wanted to put some emphasis on it. So I picked son as one of the roles. So I had my 5 or 6 roles, and they said, okay, divide that pie up into 5 or 6 slices, however many roles you pick, label each one, and then using that kind of that bullseye target to it, assess yourself. Are you doing a really good job or a really poor job, and mark it on the bullseye? So I went through and I did that. And then it was one of those moments to me that was a disruptive moment where I like looked at the results, and it wasn't like my parents would come in and go, "This is the kid is terrible," but it just wasn't great. You know, it was like, and it was mostly me. It wasn't them. It was me. I lived in a different city, and I would call them like once a week, predominantly out of like a sense of obligation. And the conversations always were the same. What's the weather like? What's the traffic like? What's your work like? What do you got going on this week? And then we hang up and I come back a week later. And I just thought, boy, it could be better than that. Yeah. So I just started doing very little things, like send them a postcard when I'm traveling for work, or I would call them up with some questions prepped that I wanted to ask them about. Because go figure, they raised 5 kids. They had some good ideas about how to raise kids, and it was helpful to me. So it just changed the dynamic of that. And I felt a lot better. I felt like if I was going to reassess it, I would be at a better spot. So you fast forward, my mom's not doing too well health-wise, and had been out of the country for a couple months. I don't think it says it in the book, but I was out of the country for a few months, and I got back into the country. And as soon as I landed back in Louisville, Kentucky, where we lived at the time, I immediately went out on another business trip. So I like hit the ground and right back out, which was pretty much my thing at the time. And I landed in Dallas. And when I landed in Dallas, I turned my phone back on, and there was a text message from one of my brothers asking me to give him a call. So I called my brother up, because I'm the dutiful, youngest of 5. I called my brother up, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Mom's not doing well. You need to come home." I said, "Yeah, no problem. I will come home. After this trip's over, I'll go back to Louisville, grab my wife, we'll drive up." He said, No, you need to come home right now. So I got back on the plane that I just got off because it was coming right back to Louisville. I flew back. My wife and I got together. We drove up to my parents' house, and I walked in the door, and my mom kind of rallied. We had a nice conversation for the next little bit. And then that night she passed away. And it was one of those things like, first of all, you hear about people saying they're the last person, like somebody's waiting for the last person to arrive, which is kind of an interesting thing when you kind of are like, I'm that last person, but I guess I was. And then after she passed away and we went through the process of the planning for and having the funeral, we were back at my dad's house. And it just feels weird. If anybody's ever been through this experience, you know that there's somebody missing. Like literally, there's somebody missing, and now it's called my dad's house. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting next to my wife, Jamie, and I said, I am so glad that I did that. I'm so glad I did that exercise. I'm so glad that I didn't say that it disrupted me, but quite frankly, it disrupted me. I'm so glad all that happened, and I made some different behaviors, and I got a different place in our relationship. And my wife said, well, you're still a son. I was like, oh man, you're right, I am. Because across the room's my dad, and my mom has always been the yes person. Mm-hmm. Yes, go do this. Yes, go do that. Sounds like fun. Let's try it. My dad's always been the no guy, and you need both in your life sometimes, but he was definitely the no guy. And so I walked over to my dad and I said, hey, Dad, I travel a lot for work. Do you want to come with me sometime? And he's like, where are you going? And I pulled my phone out and I go, I'm going to Topeka, Kansas next week. And my dad went to Topeka, Kansas. And then he went to Florida. And it just became a very different relationship. Like we stayed in hotel rooms and we traveled together, and he got to see me do my work. And I started to realize, he was a no guy in a lot of ways, but gosh, he had a lot going on. And he had 5 kids and he had a couple jobs, and he was trying to keep it all together. And I just really learned to appreciate him in a different way. So that was an example in the book about, we're not family psychologists. We don't study that type of stuff, but we know that some of the most important relationships in your life are the ones right around your dinner table, if you even have one these days. Yeah. And sometimes they go unserviced. And if that story can help somebody make it, call somebody or send a text message, then please do.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I literally saw the other day how like dining room tables are going away in people's houses, which is crazy. But no, I think it's so important. I think there's things in different areas of our life that we can proactively continue to nurture or manage to have that foundation in that area. In relationships with your significant other, maybe it's like you go on date nights, maybe you have dinner at home together, whatever it is, keeping in touch with your parents, with finances. It's like you make sure you have a emergency fund, with your career. If you're not really sure, make sure maybe you have like your resume is updated, so if you lose your job, you can pivot really quickly and stuff like that. So I think there's different things in different areas of our life that we can proactively manage or nurture, so that if something bad happens, we're less negatively impacted by it. I want to kind of back into your career. You taught at Vanderbilt for about 12 years.
Yeah.
And then going all in on the book. Talk about the decision to stop teaching at Vanderbilt, something that you had done for 12 years. And not that you were probably doing different things. Not that it was comfortable, but it was something you had done for 12 years, so it was normal. Talk about the decision to leave that and go all in on the book, speaking about it, the course that you guys are doing, and everything like that. Like, was that a tough decision? Did you wrestle with that for very long, or talk to me about that?
Yeah, I may have wrestled with it for a little while, but I kind of just, when I decided to do it, I was going to do it.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because, like we talk about in the book, there's certain behaviors of people that we found as we studied, and there's actually 16 of them in the book. And one of the behaviors, and not that everybody has every behavior. In fact, I don't think we didn't have anybody who had every behavior like nailed down,
Right.
which is great because that means you can have some strengths and other people have strengths, and together you can do some really cool things. But one of the behaviors is you have to be willing to let go of something good to get something great. And I think that's what I saw this as. I enjoyed teaching at Vanderbilt. I knew that if I walked away from Vanderbilt, odds are I'd never come back in because there's a line of 1,000 people who'd love to have that job. A professorship at a university like that is something people want. I enjoyed it so much as well. But I just decided at the end of the day, how can I go out and talk to people about opportunities to disrupt themselves and others if I'm not willing to do it myself?
Yeah.
So I got to kind of put my money where my mouth is.
Totally.
And it doesn't hurt that you have James Patterson as your writing partner because you
Yeah.
figure like, okay, we're going to get a degree of visibility, but who knows how far it's going to go. But I kind of feel, and this sounds a little bit silly maybe, but I felt like the 20s I was in the military, the 30s to 45 I built a business, 45 to 55 I taught at the university or so, and 55 and on I'm going to change the world.
Yeah.
And I'm going to help people live better lives. So I got to go for it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Were there any like principles that were in the book that you felt like you had to almost like lean on during this transition time, or maybe that you're leaning on right now during this kind of new transition time that you feel like while I'm writing this book, oh man, I got to make sure I'm living this out or I'm following this principle or whatever it might be?
Yeah, so there actually are, and you may have seen them as you went through probably, there's these 4 fundamental facts we talk about about disruption.
Yep.
And very quickly for the audience, the first one is that the status quo is a deceptive little devil, which means if you like things the way they are, enjoy the moment. They're not going to stay that way.
Yeah.
Things ebb and flow. Our lives are organic material. It's growing, it's dying, it's changing for all the time. And that's good too, because if you don't like things the way they are, they're going to change too.
Yeah.
Right. So it's going to, one day it's sunny, one day it rains, and it's going to move around. The second one is that that's okay because you're wired to disrupt. The third one is relationships, how much they matter. They provide headwinds and tailwinds in life. And then the fourth one is your time here is finite. Make it count in ways that matter. I think for me, the one that, in answer to your question, the one that I kind of leaned into and I'm trying to lean into right now is this one about it's okay, you're wired to disrupt.
Yeah.
So one of the people I interviewed for the book is a guy named Marlon Wayans. I don't know if you know who he is, but he grew up in New York, youngest of 10 kids, so twice the size of my family, but still in the last spot like me. Yeah. And 5 of them work in entertainment. So his oldest brothers started a show called In Living Color that was on TV for years. He was on that show. He was on a show called Wayans Brothers with one of his brothers. He was in a number of movies like I'm Gonna Get You Sucker and White Chicks, I think was a movie he was in. He was in Air recently. He was in Requiem for a Dream. So he's in a bunch of different movies over the years, very successful in his career. He does a lot of stand-up on Netflix. And he tells a story as I was talking to him about what was his disruptive moment. And his was actually a conversation with his older brother, a guy named Keenan Ivory Wayans, who said Marlon was dealing a little bit with like, my phone's not ringing as much as it was. I was doing these shows. I was kind of the hot commodity when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. Maybe it slowed down a little bit. And his brother was like, if you want the phone to ring, you got to be a writer, a producer, an actor, a director. You got to figure out how to do all these things. And that was a stop him in his tracks moment. Very disruptive for him. And that's what he decided to do. So as I was studying that and getting that story, and I was just thinking about, okay, that's Marlon Wayans, but what about the rest of us?
Yeah.
We may not be actors or creative in that particular way, although we're all creative in our own ways. What does he have that we all have? And what we all have, everybody has a brain. And our brains are like really cool. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I can tell you they're really cool. We're different than any other creature that walks on planet Earth or crawls or slithers or swims or whatever it does, because we can envision a different future. We can begin to manifest it. We can regulate our behavior. We can use our time wisely. We can be creative. We can do all sorts of cool things. So that's one part. So leaning into that, even myself, saying, okay, what can I do? What could I create? What could I do? How could that piece? The second piece is that we also have experiences, and our experiences can be really informative. If you're listening to this right now and you're thinking you're like in a low spot right now, just take a few moments to jot down some cool stuff you've done in your life and what you've overcome. Maybe you went back to school, or maybe you took on a project at work, or maybe you took care of a family member who was ill, or whatever it might be. It's like, gosh, our experiences show us that we can deal with stuff.
Right.
And then the third one is our resources. So when I started, people in your lives, like you were talking about earlier, even if you feel financially strapped, sometimes you can just move money around a little bit and, kind of live like no one else for a while, type of thing. So when I think about those things now, I think about like my brain, my experiences, my resources. How do I continue to apply them in ways that ultimately keep that fourth fundamental fact in position, which is your time is finite, make it count in ways that matter.
Yeah.
So to me, it's always like thinking, because I could say to myself, and I guess in the darker night, sometimes I could say to myself, well, who am I to lead the study at Vanderbilt for years? Well, I was trained to do it and I worked on it. Who am I to write the book with him? Who am I to go out and tell people what I've learned and how they might, if not me, who? And why wouldn't I? I've been very fortunate to work and have opportunities to get into this position, and I just really want to help people live their best lives.
Totally. I think that all of us have that last little feeling at some point, the imposter syndrome, but it's really just like a fear, or it's really an insecurity that's holding you back. It's like everybody has never done something until they've done it the first time, right? I think Zig Ziglar used to say that everything is worth doing poorly until you learn to do it well. And then I love how you said that you can lean back on, like, actually the human body, the human brain is built for this, it's wired for this, and that can give you some sort of confidence, and then the experience and the resources can provide you with that little bit of confidence as well. Kind of along the same lines, there's obviously the very common phrase that people use, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And then but also the need to be innovative and to try new things. How do you think about when to decipher which is the correct thing, when it is actually the right time to, you just need to be consistent. You haven't done it for long enough. You haven't pounded the pavement for long enough. You haven't cranked the well long enough, versus like, that's old news.
Yeah.
It's time to innovate. How do you think about deciphering between those two things?
That's a tough one. Yeah. It really is. I mean, because you'll hear people in the startup
both
world.
Can be true.
Yeah, they can say you got to pivot, you got to change, you got to adapt, and then the other side is like double down, keep leaning in there. I mean, one of those 16 behaviors is trust your instincts. And Jim Patterson says it this way. I asked him one time, do you think everybody has a gut worth trusting? He's like, absolutely not. No, they don't. And I was speaking to an audience in the Bahamas, which was a pretty good gig to get. It was like January a couple years ago, and I was talking. One of the things we did is we were writing the book, is we'd go out and speak about it to get feedback from audiences. So I spoke to tens of thousands of people about the concepts that we were working on. So I was in front of this audience like a couple years ago in Bahamas, and I was in this hotel that had a casino in it. And I asked the question to the audience, how many by show of hands believe that people have a good guts worth following? How many people believe? Everybody's got that. And I was surprised, like the number of people like, yeah, everybody's had great instincts. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And the audience was like, yeah. And I'm like, go to that casino at 2 a.m. and tell me people have good instincts. Now, granted, they might be a little bit impaired in those decisions, but no, everybody doesn't have good instincts. But instincts often come from experience and from just time in the seat sometimes and seeing lots of things. So you can improve on those instincts by having that exposure. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to realize, like, maybe I'm not the right one, so I need to go talk to other people. So should I pivot or double down on a strategy? Sometimes it's what your instincts telling you. Sometimes you bring in some smart people and you share it with them and say, what do you think? And you mentioned like going to church. I mean, there's a lot of value in thinking individually about what you want to do, but then there's also community, and community can give you some good insight into what needs to be done. And so it comes down to a lot of like, where are you trying to go? Where do you see the opportunity? Are you seeing something that maybe you just feel like other people aren't saying? What do you see to be true at that moment about business or about the opportunity? And you have to kind of trust your instincts, have some good people around you. And then what you don't want to do though, I believe, is you don't want to go, I'm going to pull back and I'm going to step in. I'm going to pull back and I'm going to step in. Because that's the real trick. I taught strategy for a long time at Vanderbilt, and strategy is all about decisions, and our lives are all about decisions. And when you try to straddle everything, you do nothing well. Yeah. And that's just, it's true. It's totally. It's law of diminishing returns, as we would say, right?
I know for sure. I know for me, that's has been over the years. I feel like I've gotten better at it the last couple of years as an entrepreneur. Sometimes my biggest struggle, the shiny object syndrome, like, ooh, let's go do that a little bit. And then like, oh, that would be awesome. Let's go do that a little bit. And continuing to jump from one thing to the next. And me, who's just kind of like a positive, like everything sounds cool, everything sounds fun, would like jump. But like you said, you have to focus on something for a while to know whether or not it's going to move the needle or whether or not it's going to work. And then to go back on the relying on your gut or trusting your gut and your instinct thing, I do think the trying to assess what's behind the gut instinct is important. And a couple examples real quick. So I told you my wife and I bought this house back in December. We were looking seriously at another house right before it, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is kind of like right where we thought we wanted it. It's a beautiful house. It's a little bit of a stretch financially, but like maybe it's the right thing.
It is a great place.
And it could have been, it was a different house.
Oh, I was like, this is a great place. Yeah.
Well, thank you. But we were looking at a different house, and it was like more of a stretch financially, and we were kind of like just gung ho about it. We're like, this feels right, let's do it. And then I like looked at the number, I was like, this is just be a dumb decision. Like, let's not go in over our heads. And I told you I'm looking at different spaces to open up a gym right now, and I feel like the same thing could happen. Like, oh, this is the space. I can see a vision. Like, this would be really good. And I guess my point is sometimes I feel like what we think might be our gut instinct might be more an emotional decision rather than something super rational. And sometimes we need to go back and think more rationally about where's our gut instinct coming from.
Yeah, there's people say sometimes, I'm not my emotions, but oh man, we are a lot. Our emotions are a big deal. One thing that we often talk about, you mentioned a course. So there's a company called Franklin Covey. Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and there was a company built initially on that called Covey Leadership Center that then merged with another company called Franklin Quest and created Franklin Covey. And these days they're a publicly traded company, a few $100 million a year in revenue, and they work with clients around the world to help their people improve performance and help change behavior. And they actually licensed the content from the book for us to develop a course called From Disruption to Innovation. And one thing that's in that course is the idea of every time you have a disruption. So if you're thinking right now, if you're listening to this, think about a disruption going on in your life, some situation where you're not sure exactly what to do with it.
Yeah.
It could be unique to you, like I mentioned, like a doctor's report or a project opportunity. It might be exciting or not exciting or whatever it might be. It could be something going on across your organization or your company or whatever it might be. It's something you're not sure what to do. It's disrupting you. And one of the things to think about is what emotions do you have tied to that, and get those down, like spell them out for yourself and take a look at them and see how much of those emotions are they coming from a rational place or maybe an irrational place? Because you have to process through some of those things before you even decide what you're going to do.
Yeah.
If you just go from stimulus to response, you kind of take your own free will out of it. Totally. And we don't want people to do that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, the stimulus to response thing, Viktor Frankl, Man Search for Meaning.
Yep, that's right.
Having that gap is really important, and that's to an extent when I'm talking about why you bring that up, right? What I'm talking about, there needs to be maybe a little bit of rationality sometimes because the stimulus to response, while people say and maybe give credit to their gut or their instinct, it's kind of just an emotional decision, an emotional response that you didn't really think too much about, and you're a little bit in over your head. When we think about, let's go a little bit into that course, just from disruption to innovation. We talked a while back about anticipation, proactivity. When something does happen, what are instead of just like moving on and maybe asking for advice, what are some like innovative? What are some things that we can ask ourselves, or things that we can do to trigger innovative thoughts or creative thoughts that maybe haven't really been done before?
That's a great question. What we found is, as we were out talking to these people, that these people that we called positive disruptors. So these are people who take disruptive moments, and some of them are horrific. I mean, there's some you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Some things that happen to people that we write about in the book. So everything wasn't just like puppy dogs and balloons, right? There were lots of things where it's like, oh gosh, what would you do in this situation? What they all did is they tended to follow a similar process. We call it the disruptive loop in the book. But basically, a disruption happens, and the first step they do is they discern. Right. So they've done to some degree the hard work well before the disruption came, about thinking about who they are and where they're going and what matters to them, that fire inside piece. And then when the disruption comes, they discern. And we talk about a number of roles that you can take on. So there's 5 of them, but basically The roles deal with, are you going to move toward a change, or are you going to move towards stability? Are you going to move out on your own or move out with other people? And so it's kind of those 4 areas. And each of those roles comes with its own positives and negatives, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
So I might say, you know what, there's this new change coming, this new opportunity, and I think I want to chase after that thing. I'm gonna take that job. I'm gonna build that business. I'm gonna do whatever it might be. We call that person a trailblazer. They're moving toward change. They're moving out individually. Other people might have a disruption that happens, and they go, you know what, I'm going to lead my team at work to be better at customer service, and I'm going to lead a movement. So I'm going to be moving toward change, but doing it with and through other people, and I'll be a torchbearer. I'll light the path for other people. There's other people that say, you know what, that's interesting that that's happening, but I'm actually not going to take a lot of action on it. I'm going to let that one pass, or I'm going to do the minimum I need to do here, but not turn everything upside down.
Right.
They want to go towards stability. And there's some people in the book we talk about who had that great opportunity to take on that new job or whatever it might be. And everybody else may have said, go do that. But then they thought about their own purpose and what they valued in life. And they're like, I'm not the right person. It's not the right move for me. It's going to come at the cost of something else that I'm not willing to give up, as opposed to just reacting to it. Yeah. And sometimes when you're faced with the disruption, especially if everybody else is kind of running toward the change, to be the one that says, actually, I'm not going to do that. That can be the most disruptive thing possible that you can do. I mean, think about when you're a kid, when all your friends wanted to do X, Y, Z, and your conscience is saying, no, that's not the right thing. We shouldn't do it. And you tell your friends no, and they all look at you because you're being disruptive to them at that moment. So we saw people and organizations that did that, whether they led a complete disruptive movement or just disrupted themselves individually. So each of those roles is kind of important. And what we find is that we have tendencies towards them. Right. Like some people might be like, I want to charge that mountain, all the time. That's where they're wired. But the question becomes, okay, you have your own tendency, but then what is the situation calling for you to do? Yeah. And as mature adults, we have to be able to discern, where do I want to go? What's the context calling for me to do? And how do I make a decision? So that's kind of the first key.
Yeah, no, I love that framework to be thinking about when a disruptive situation occurs, thinking about, okay, first off, maybe what is my natural tendency? Which of these 4 is a natural tendency, and which of these 4 is the right, is this situation calling for at the moment? That's great. Along the similar lines, I have a lot of peers who are around their 30s, early 30s, mid 30s, who they're in a place, and a lot of people find themselves at this place in their career where they've been in a job for a while now. And so maybe they've been promoted once, twice, or whatnot, and so they have some stability. They've felt like they have garnered some sort of reputation in that industry or with that job. And they're in this point where, I don't know if I want to be in this thing for the rest of my life, but I've already made a pretty good progress. But at the same time, like, I think I want to do something else, but I'm not really super clear on what that other thing is. How should that person go about discerning whether or not they should stay down the same road, whether or not they need to pivot, if they're in this place where, like, I've garnered some reputation, I don't love the job itself. I think I might want to do something else, but I don't really have much clarity as to what that other thing is. I know that's tough. Like,
no. Tough, well, I mean, I think, and I'll go back to it again because purpose matters a lot. So as we talk about in the book, you have this fire inside you, and you have to define what that is. So the question becomes, with each disruption, we have the chance to actually throw fuel on that fire or not. So I would say that if I'm sitting in a job and I'm in my 30s as you played it out, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm so far in, should I keep doing this or should I do something else? And I would fall back on, first of all, the fundamental fact that time here is finite. You got to make it count in ways that matter. Somebody asked me not that long ago, what's the opposite of a positive disruptor? So we talk about these people being positive disruptors. What's the opposite of a positive disruptor? And you might think it's a negative disruptor, right? Oh, it's the person who blows up the meeting. It's a curmudgeon. It's the difficult guy or gal. You see them come in and you're like, oh man, there they are, type of thing. That's actually not the opposite when it comes down to whether or not you're going to be a positive disruptor. What's the opposite is the relentless pursuit of comfort. Yeah. Right? If you're just trying to be comfortable all the time and you're not stretching yourself, you will not necessarily make a big ripple in your world. And by the way, the comfort is elusive and it comes at a cost too. Yeah.
I think that's so true. I'm thinking of a few individuals in my mind who are in this situation, and I know a lot of people are in this situation. That's so true, right? oftentimes we're fearful to step out to the unknown because that's uncomfortable. But at the same time, you're just in a maybe currently situation that is still uncomfortable, but not as uncomfortable in the moment as you think it might be if you wander off into this unknown territory. But I think one of the things that we need to realize when we're in that scenario, it's like the little bit of fear that's in the present and that lingers and that lingers and that lingers is a small negative in comparison to the bigger regret that could be looming in the future. And so I think it's really
and I think Jim at the beginning says a lot of people push back on change or don't want to go after something, and they live with a lot of regret and anger and feeling like something's against them, and now we're going to take it and harness it for something good.
And what do you feel like is the biggest leap of faith that you've taken in your career or life?
I don't know.
When you've gone into an unknown territory where you're like, I have no idea what
there's been a few of them, right? Starting a business.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember laying in bed going, how am I going to make, $100,000 in payroll this week? That type of thing. I mean, that's like that. I think, and I'll just tie it to this project. So when this thing was started out, and I tried to get Patterson to work on the book with me, and I was kind of struggling. I gave him a couple outlines. He didn't really like it. And we'd had that conversation where he's like, sometimes you want to work with somebody, it just doesn't kind of work out. And that's like, that kind of, but I still was in the game. So I just rolled the dice on something. I went to the chancellor at Vanderbilt, Chancellor Dearmeyer, who in our world, that's the president of the university. That's the number one person in the organization. And there's lots of people who report up to the chancellor, and I was way down, somewhere in the structure. So for a professor to go make an appointment with the chancellor is kind of rare. But I thought to myself, well, James Patterson's a pretty successful guy from Vanderbilt. It's probably good that we have a good relationship with him. I've got him on my phone right now. I could talk to the chancellor, see if he could help me out. So I walk into the chancellor's office, and don't ask me where these numbers came from. So I walk into the chancellor's office, and I say, Chancellor Dearmeyer, I have a 15% chance of writing a book with arguably one of our most successful graduates in their own field and one of the world's best-selling authors, if not the world's best-selling author. But if you give me what I want, it'll go to 50% immediately. And if I do what I promise you I'm going to do, it's going to go up 2 to 3% every month. And he said, what do you want? I said, I want funding for a research team. I need XYZ money. He said, okay, you got it. Now, here's the thing. If you fast forward, and this is not an exaggeration, if you fast forward the number of months it took to finally get that book manuscript sold, and you were to say 2 to 3% each month is 2.5%, 50% that day plus 2.5% per month. It was exactly 100% the month we sold the book.
Wow.
Yeah. So my wife works at Vanderbilt too, and she bumped into Chancellor Dearmeyer not that long ago, and he said, your husband's tenacious. And I think I'm respectful. I think I believe I'm kind. I think my heart's in the right place in so many ways, although I'm, I sin like the rest of us, and I'm trying to get better every day. But I also realize, like, when I want something, I'm going to do whatever it takes within reason to make that thing happen. And I felt like this is one that I want to land.
That tenacity, if somebody is thinking about whether or not to continue to see something through, because you talked about it earlier, how oftentimes where I had it written down, sometimes we're not willing to let things go. You said we're oftentimes not willing to let go of good for great, and that's not really the situation, but there's sometimes like a sunk cost where we feel like we've put so much time and energy, I don't want to give it up now. With you, there was a lot of time and energy put into this thing, and you really wanted to see it all the way through. You really wanted to see it all the way through, but it wasn't seeming to budge. How did you know it wasn't time to give up? How did you know that the tenacity was something that you still wanted to bring forward?
Because I thought his story was compelling, and I thought what we were trying to answer the question on was something that everybody's struggling with. Everybody's struggling right now to varying degrees and living in a world that's very disruptive. COVID taught us all that, but conversations in your family teach you this. Opportunities at work teach you this. AI is teaching us this. Businesses you thought would never go away are all of a sudden gone. Tariffs are happening. Supply chain. Just kind of keep layering it on. And we realize, like, wow, this is really a disruptive time going on. Not that it hasn't always been disruptive in human history, but there's some accelerants going on right now. So everybody's kind of feeling it. And I felt like it's such a compelling thing to say, if we can teach people to understand what they can do and where the agency actually resides in those moments of disruption, that's huge. And when I just felt like the why was big enough, it just made sense to keep chasing this thing. And, if it didn't work out with the chancellor supporting me, or if it didn't work out with James doing it, or whatever it might be, I was still going to pursue it. Just didn't know how it was going to play out.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean,
so if the why is big enough, you figure you can overcome anyhow.
100%. I love it. Back to Viktor Frankl. No, but I think the idea there is that if you're that passionate about it and you think that it has the need or that the purpose behind it is strong enough, like you said, then continue to see it through. Don't give up on it. And so I think whatever.
But there's also the practical side of it, saying like you can be really passionate about something, but there's no need for it in the world.
Yeah.
And it's not solving a problem, and you just have a really great hobby that's taking up a ton of your time, and that's cool too. Just like be realistic about what it is. One of the other behaviors is in there is looking at the brutal reality of something, and like looking at it and going, okay, here's where I really stand. Yeah. There's lots of people who say like, I want to be a songwriter. We live in Nashville, right? I want to be a songwriter, or I want to be a writer, write books, or whatever it might be. And they'll tell you it at cocktail parties, and it's kind of fun to talk about. And maybe if that serves a purpose for you to say that, that's totally fine. Like, tell them you got this great book and you're hoping to write it someday, and it's fun to talk about at the cocktail party. But if you really want to write a book, or you really want to write a song, or you really want to get in better shape, or whatever it is, songwriters write songs. People are fit, like, don't put certain things in their mouth and they move more. I mean, that's just what they do, right? So you just got to there's choices you have to make in life.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Through this experience of getting to know James, and like you mentioned, he's like the best-selling author of all time. What do you feel like is some of the top lesson that you've learned from him? And this can be through any kind of conversation about life that you've had with him. It could be a career conversation. It could be a conversation about writing a book, promoting a book, or anything like that. What do you think is like one of the top lessons that you
Man, there's so many. I'll give you a few.
Yeah.
I'll give you a few. So, I'm very fortunate in working with him that, he puts a lot of books out, right? Yeah. He has several co-authors he works with, and he's putting 10, 11 books out a year. The other day he had the #1 New York Times bestseller, nonfiction and fiction at the same time, which is a world record. That's never happened before. He has the Guinness Book of World Records record for the number of #1 New York Times bestsellers. I mean, it's amazing. But I'm not disclosing anything that people don't know. If you look it up, he's 78, I believe, right now. When you talk to him if I talk to him on Zoom, he's got about 20 some manuscripts around him, handwriting. So he's very driven in a way. He's very fulfilled in what he's doing. He values his wife and his relationship with his wife really strongly. They have one child, Jack, and every day he and Sue get up and they golf a little bit. He writes a little bit. They go out to lunch together. He has a life that is big and well known as his. He has a life that's very grounded and very focused on things that matter most to their family, which I think is really cool. He says to me, like, I can have some anxiety like anybody else, right? So I'm like, oh gosh, we got to do this and we're going to do that. And he'll say to me something like, Patrick, do you want to drink from the cup of grief or the cup of joy today? Stuff like that. And I'm like, damn, I want a cup of joy. I'm going to do the cup of joy. So there's those type of things. And then he's really in touch with, as a writer, and I've written other books before, so he's really in touch with the customer, the reader, and how people consume information these days, and how you can keep people engaged. Coming from academia, I'll write stuff that'll go on forever, without getting to a point sometimes, because it's like the right words. And he's like, got to keep the page moving, got to keep it turning, and you can't deny his success. I mean, the guy has sold over 425 million book copies. Get this, there's only 2 people on planet Earth right now who have made over $1 billion writing books: J.K. Rowling and James Patterson.
Wow.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
From that perspective. But at the same time, it was funny. We went out to eat dinner with him a few times, and last time we went out to eat dinner with my wife and I were there with Jim and Sue. And when the bill came, actually 2 times earlier we went out to eat. We went out to eat at a nice restaurant in New York, and the bill came, and I went to reach for it, and he grabbed it and said, "You don't want this one," is what he said to me. It was an expensive restaurant, right? So last time we got together in Florida, the bill came, and I grabbed it. And I picked it up, and he turned to his wife, and they both just fist bumped each other. And I was like, "That's so cool." I mean, it's just like he's enjoying that little moment there. He's got a partner who's going to pick the bill up. We're both picking up this same end, both ends of the same stick type of thing. So it's fun to work with him. Yeah,
that's hilarious. Some disruptions are thrown upon us.
Yeah.
Some disruptions we should intentionally seek out. What do you feel like is the next intentional disruption for you that you want to seek out? Whether that's, again, career, it could be, health, personal life, career, finances, spiritual life, relationships. Like, what do you feel like is, the disruption that you kind of, to an extent, like, sought out and that we already talked about was the relationship with your mother. What's a disruption that you feel like is something that you need to lean into intentionally at some point?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few, but you mentioned relationships. So my son got married. Well, we have two kids. We have a daughter and a son. Our daughter's in her early 30s, and our son's in his late 20s. He got married a couple years ago, and I was his best man.
Oh,
and
awesome.
It's not like the guy didn't have any friends. He had lots of friends, but he asked me to be his best man. And it's like that's
cool.
that's like an achievement you have that you really never set as a goal type of thing. Who sets that as a goal necessarily? But now that I've had that one, I like realize, gosh, that's possible. I have two granddaughters, and I'm like, how am I really good grandpa to them? And I fall down, I say stupid stuff, and whatever it might be, and not always the perfect example by any stretch. Yeah. But how do I? Right now, my oldest of the granddaughter's 2.5 years old. My wife and my daughter thought that I taught this to my granddaughter, but I didn't. She just started saying, "Pawpaw's my best friend. Pawpaw, best friend." And I'm like, man, if I can keep delivering on that, I'll take that one. Yeah, that's a win.
Well, that's great. That's great. I love that you said, I'm focused on being a good grandfather. I'm not going to always be great at it, but it's like as long as you're aiming at it, you're going to end up being better than you would otherwise have been. That's actually what probably the greatest lesson that Chris McChesney taught me on the podcast that when I interviewed him a few years ago. We were talking about goals, and he was talking about how one of the many reasons why you set goals is just because whether or not you achieve it, you're going to end up somewhere a whole lot better than you otherwise would have been.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I go through an exercise every year together where we set goals in 4 areas. So kind of whole person goals. So we set a physical goal, we set a spiritual goal, we set emotional goals or relationship goals, and we set intellectual goals. And I think it's important to kind of set those goals. Sometimes we don't nail them. I'll tell you, we nail them a lot more because we write them down and give it a shot and kind of track it. But even just like if you were to set a goal saying we're going to, whatever it might be, unfortunately, we can't quantify a lot of things. And you count how much time you're going to spend together or what you're going to do together, whatever it might be. Even if you don't deliver on that, you're probably a lot better off than you were. That's one thing. Like I'm wearing an Apple Watch right now. One thing I don't like about devices like this, and maybe you're really into them. I don't know. I don't know my stuff. But like, there's something weird. It's like the 10,000 step thing. If I got 9,500 steps, I feel like a failure that day. That's ridiculous. Totally. I mean, maybe I was only doing 6,000 steps before, and 9,500 is pretty darn good. Yeah. So there's not a binary thing like you win or you lose in life. There's a scale. It's a sliding light type thing.
No, I think I'm glad you said that, and we'll wrap up because I know time's coming to an end here. But that's so important to remember with goals. That's one of the things with people that I coach. Everybody is in a sense required to set goals. Sure. I think that goals are essential, but I think that if you have a poor relationship with them or you don't exactly know how to like mentally navigate them, then it can be harmful because of like things that you just said. If I set a goal of getting 10,000 steps a day and I only get 9,500, I feel like a failure. It's like, no, you're still in a hell of a lot better place than you would have if you had never set the goal in the first place. And so like, that's just because our world has gotten too black and white in so many instances where it's like living in the gray is fine in a lot of instances. But you guys need to make sure you go get the book, Disrupt Everything and Win. Take control of your future. By the time this comes out, it might have already released. What's the release date again?
September 29th.
September 29th. That's right. I think it will probably have like just released, so it'll be good timing. But super excited for the book to come out. I've already read it. It is phenomenal. You guys need to make sure you go get it on Amazon. You can also go to patrickleddin.com to go check out more about Patrick. Where is the course located?
The course through Franklin Covey actually comes out November 24th. Okay. And people get it through the Franklin Covey company. There's actually a page in the back of the book that points people to that. Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, sounds good. Anything else that you want to wrap up?
No, I'll just wrap up with this. You mentioned goals, and I'm a pretty big goal setter, and sometimes to the detriment of other things in my life. And my son and I, the one I was the best man at, I guess you missed that. A couple of years ago, he and I hiked Kilimanjaro. Oh, wow. And when we were hiking Kilimanjaro, my achiever side was kicking in. Like I'm talking every night to the guide, like how far are we going tomorrow and what altitude are we going to be at and blah, 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 blah. And the dude was like, basically like, can you just enjoy the trip? And that really caused me to pause and say, am I enjoying the journey? And maybe you call it the cup of joy, you call it whatever you want. But at the end of the day, life's tough. And people are listening to this wanting to, become the best version of themselves, which I fully support, and I hope they all achieve that. but give yourself a break along the way sometimes and just look around and enjoy the people on the ride with you and enjoy the progress you are making. And that's really what makes it so much better. Stephen Covey, we mentioned Covey earlier. Stephen Covey said nobody on their deathbed wishes they spent more time in the office. And that may or may not be true, but I think there is a degree of truth to that for sure. And just, enjoy your life.
No doubt. You don't want to set goals to the detriment of your ability to be present.
Yeah, exactly.
And be where your feet are. You want to make sure you can focus on the process and be present and everything like that. Well, this has been great, Patrick. You guys make sure you go get the book, Disrupt Everything and Win. Take control of your future. It is awesome. It's a must read, so make sure you grab it. We'll have the link in the show notes in the description down below. If you're listening on the Apple Podcast app or Spotify, make sure you hit the follow button. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit like and subscribe down below. But I appreciate you guys for watching. Patrick, that was awesome, man. Appreciate your time. That's all we got.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, everybody.